Okay, and now we're going to talk about presentations. No matter what kind of presentations you need to make, all of your presentations will have a beginning, will have an end. So what we're going to do now is cover exactly that. Those things that no matter what kind of presentation you're giving, you will need. So every kind of presentation that we make will have an opening. We can go with hello, or good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming here today. I would like to begin by introducing myself. For example, my name is X and I am, whatever your position is, at such and such company. Remember that in English we say at a company, not by a company. Another possibility is let me introduce myself, or let me just start by introducing myself. One way of talking about my job is to use the phrase I am in charge of. I am in charge of the sales department. I am in charge of, or I am responsible for. Some people will want, and usually they will use the word see. They will need to see the big picture. And some other people will want to know every single detail. So it's always a good idea to have something for everybody. Let's think about this as if we were cooking dinner. If you know that some of your guests are vegetarians, you will have some dishes that are vegetarian dishes. In this case, it could be a good idea to do an overview of the presentation, giving the big picture. A phrase I can use, if that's what I want to do right now, could be something like, I would briefly like to take you through today's presentation. I can also walk you through today's presentation. Let me tell you a little bit about the Romans. Why is this woman talking about the Romans? Well, the Romans, they were in the British Isles for 400 years. Not a very long time, but enough to have left many traits in the language. A lot of very well-known Romans were, or are still, very famous for their speeches, because they were very good public speakers. But we are talking about a time when there were no PowerPoint presentations, no computers, and no technology whatsoever, right? So how did these great public speakers remember the speeches or the presentations, if you want, that they had planned? Well, they had a very interesting technique. They used to write and to prepare and to plan their presentations at home. And those days, houses were kind of long, one room leading to the other, so they would plan each part of the presentation in a different room of their houses. And the day of the speech, they would just have to remember their homes, and that would give them the sequence. They also use their hands. That's why in English we say on the one hand and on the other hand. Because the speaker would think of certain, for example, advantages or disadvantages of something, and put those concepts in a picture on one of his hands, and then the other concept on the other hand. And the moment they were delivering the speech, they just had to look at the hands. So I could say I would briefly like to take you through today's presentation, walk you through today's presentation. I can say what the topic of the presentation is. The topic of today's presentation is we are going to go over, discuss, talk about. We also have to make a very important decision very early, and this could be a good point for that decision. Am I going to use I or we? Well, if it's only me, you can say. But you see what? In a way, if I work for a company and I represent my company, it could be we. More important than that, I can use we, meaning the audience, the listeners, and I. So now it's not I'm talking. We are discussing, going over. And this helps to build this idea of a team. We are working together. So if I want to give this big picture, I can say that the presentation is divided into 3 parts, 5 sections. Or we have split our presentation into 3 parts, 5 sections. I like to think of the role of the presenter a little bit like a tour guide. I like this concept of going for a walk together with the audience, which reminds me not only of the Romans, reminds me already of the Greek and the philosophers going for a walk with the disciples and discussing and questioning and answering and thinking. So, as a tour guide, your role is to lead, to show the way. When people read, if they don't understand something, if they got lost in their thoughts, right, they can go back and read the sentence again. But when you are presenting, people cannot press pause, rewind, play. So a good idea is to start giving them signals, putting on like some signs along the way so people don't get lost. If I have just said something like, okay, the presentation is divided into 3 parts, it could be a good idea when I talk about the 3 parts to use ordinal numbers like first, second, third, so they know which of those 3 parts I'm talking about right now. Where are we right now? How long will the presentation be? Well, this presentation will take 5 minutes. This presentation will last 30 minutes. I will talk for 10 minutes. I plan to be brief. Who knows what brief is? Very important business word. You are going to hear that a lot in meetings. Please be brief. What are they saying to you? Right. Brief means short. But when we are talking about text, well, something that I say or something that I write, why don't you write me a brief email?